Publishing, where we discuss Edward Leeds Scanlon's Coral Castle, the mysteries thereof, its connection to the periodic table, the temple graphic that we drew up that represents a double image of the periodic table, which I believe is the floor plan of King Solomon's temple, which is what Edward was alluding to with his castle. And it's how I came to this conclusion by double imaging Edward's castle and its connection to not just the periodic table, but DNA and the zodiac. But Ephraim and Manasseh, Rachel and Leah, this actually led me to the Genesis 49 zodiac. This ties directly into that. And I began to realize that the center of the zodiac is the same thing Marco Rodin calls the 369. Okay, that's the implosion and the explosion, which is the pinch point, which is the what they call the Big Bang. Okay, and that zodiac is Zeus, which is northeast, southwest, and Yahweh, Yah-A-H-W-E-H, is the same thing. So all these people saying, oh, the Greek legends, those are false gods. The name Yahweh means the same thing. It's talking about the source code of everything. The one that existed before it subdivided into all things. And that one is God. And that's where the zodiac comes from. Okay, and that zodiac, that center, represents where we are now and where we were in the past. So it represents your past and your present, and the potential is God. He lives in the eternal potential. And I covered that in a different episode. So let's get into, I could get into INRI, which is the sign that, what's his name, Pontius Pilate put above Jesus hanging on the cross, and how that ties into Orion. But we'll cover that some other time. Very interesting, though. But you learn these things, you figure these things out. You look at INRI, and believe it or not, if you read it backwards, it's IRNI. But you could get iridium's in there, infrared's in there. But Orion is in that INRI. And once you realize how to do it, you realize, man, this gets pretty interesting. But I don't want to bog down into it. I'm just giving you the light touch today. I'm not diving deep into it. That'll come later on. I'm just getting you familiarized with that cross that I created, which is the alphabet based on Jesus' cross and the temple center line, and how it works and how it enabled me to come up with all these answers where before all I had was questions. And all I could tell my offspring, all I could tell my family members is, oh, Deuteronomy 29:29, I don't know. I got tired of saying that. I'm like, that ain't what God said. He said he told us the answers to these mysteries, and that happened in the 1800s. It happened after 1850, right around 1800s and to the 1900s, when Maxwell, Euler, all the greats, they tapped into what these storylines were actually tapping into, because electricity, they started messing with it, and they realized the number 3 is a coil, okay? And that's the 3, 6, and 9, and that coil represents the 6 and the 9 trading places of the Amorites. The 6, 9 becomes, the 9 becomes a 6, 6 becomes, they're trading places. That's the up, down, positive, negative. And the 3 represents your spin. Okay, you got coils in a transformer hanging on a pole outside your house or in an underground transformer. The coils are either they're wound right-hand rule or left-hand rule. And supposedly Maxwell taught his students how to, the example he used is masturbation with your right hand, masturbation with your left hand. That is one thing I was reading years and years ago. I can't remember where I read that source, but supposedly that is how he got them to remember the right-hand coil rule and the left-hand coil rule. Don't quote me on that. Not sure if that's true or not, but would not surprise me. Great way to teach young men how things work in the real world. So you look at a transformer, you have your primary coils through the oil transferring through induction, through magic, okay, over to the secondary coils. And these coils can go this way, and these coils can go this way, or they can both be this way, or they can both be this way. Okay, you got additive, subtractive polarities. That gets into some really deep stuff that electricians and linemen know. Don't want to cover it. But I'm telling you right now that That's what the number 3, why they make that symbol. It's an electromagnetic coil. Okay? And that's a very, very deep well right there. I don't want to touch on it any more than I already have. I don't want to get into consonant sound categories, stops, plosives, fricatives, affricatives, combinations of stop and fricatives, nasals, liquids, and glides, bilabial, labial, dental, dental, alveolar, post alveolar, palatal, and velar glottal. That is how you create sounds in your mouth. Everything I just named is how you're putting your lips together, you're pushing your tongue against the back of your throat, and you're making sounds from your diaphragm, and you're making clicking noises, and you're making pops by putting your lips together and blowing air through. This is very interesting stuff. And a matter of fact, Marco Rodin himself brought this to my attention. And he said, there's only like 7 or so ways that we produce. All our language comes from these very simple things. Okay, and then you get into your African, South African languages where they're using clicks. And I forget what that language is called. Very interesting language, but that is actually a binary system. That all languages come from that type of system. You think, oh no, the Chinese is very advanced, and English is hard for Chinese people to learn, and Chinese is hard for English people to learn. Let me tell you something. If you reduce things back to the binary or the 3, you'd be surprised how similar all languages are. What clicked off, probably the thing that really motivated me the most, was when I realized King A, who has a uterus. When I realized King Ahasuerus of the Book of Esther was the pyramid, not the Great Pyramid, I call it the once Great Pyramid, Khufu, Cheops. That represents the 3, the coil. Okay, that represents the spin. All right, that represents, you read in Genesis where it says God placed a cherub who had a sword that turned in all directions to keep the way of what? Carbon, the tree of life. What is that cherub? It's the pyramid in Egypt with the X in the north shafts and the equals in the south shafts. Okay, and Jacob's saying, I took with my sword and my bow from the Amorites. Okay, so Jacob is identifying with being that source. So the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is one thing, right? Now you got the tree of life. Okay, and the tree of life is the center pyramid. It's us. And now they're saying, oh, there's these big shafts with these coils around it. No kidding. I'm shocked. Oh, what are the mysterious stuff under the middle pyramid? Well, it's carbon. You think it could be related to the, what they call the mortal coil? DNA? Huh? You think? It's not hard, people. We're making it way harder than it is. But King Ahasuerus, King A who has a uterus, in any, you read Greek where there's an AE combination, and then they talk about the ether of the universe. Today they're calling dark energy, dark matter. They're coming up with all these fancy new terms claiming, oh, we discovered this stuff. No, that is from the old world. That's etheron energy. That's AE, Adam and Eve energy. It's not hard, people. We've made it way harder. And the people today stole all this stuff. The north, south, east, west is your Cartesian coordinates. They stole it, and they're like, oh, that we attribute that to Rene Descartes. Well, Rene Descartes would be mortified, okay, because he knows where he got it. He was a scholar in the Bible. All these people knew. They had to learn their little Sunday school lessons. They grew up hard back in those days when all of Europe was very strict Christian. All right, let me cover, watchmen, wise men, midwives. Those are all MWWM combinations. They're all connected. That's when I realized, oh man, this word letter etymology is very critical. Nebuchadnezzar's name, you got the N and the Z. All right, I've already talked about that in a previous episode. Mount Nebo, where Moses got buried. That's actually oven, O-V-E-N. You take the B and it's a V. You look on your typewriter, your B and V are connected closely because B and V are, you look on the word letter etymology cross and you got B, and where's the V? It's where the UV is, just above the X. Okay, so the B, we call it today beta. Okay, and when people are being called betas, they're talking about they're masturbators. They're people who aren't settled inside themselves. They're not fully developed adults. Okay, when you hear Jesse, I forget his last name, talking about that's beta, that's beta. That's someone who's spending too much time thinking of porn. They're not getting their life goals accomplished. They're not going out as a young man, a young conqueror, and conquering. Okay, they're doing beta things, and that's attributed. I got my lower letters in blue, the upper letters are in red. Well, your B and V kind of they're connected because obviously the V and the B that has to do with Eve, okay, and being a beta, and that has nothing to do with men being alphas and women being betas. Remember, there's women who are daughters of Adam who are alphas, and there are women who are daughters of Eve that are betas. Okay, they're following other women. They're not what do you call it? Blazing their own trail. They're acting kind of beta. All right, they're worshiping other women instead of finding their center line and solidifying their center line. Okay, so it works for both sexes. The Bible, in a lot of ways, is sexless. Okay, once you realize this, you're like, so this doesn't really have anything to do with men and women or this sex versus that sex. Nothing. Very little to do with it. AB as in Absalom is alpha beta. Okay. This one blew my mind. I started realizing that these equations, Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared, Euler's identity, e to the power of I pi plus 1 equals 0. I'm like, wait a minute, that can be explained sociologically through human, like, cultural advancements or decline? Yes. It doesn't just apply to quantum physics. And by the way, Einstein said it in his own words. He may not have understood the magnitude of what he was saying, but he was saying that it's the observer is watching this stuff go by. He described a spaceship where this guy's looking at this guy get older, but this guy's looking at this guy and he's not aging. Okay, that perspective that you have. Einstein's, that the magnitude of that statement he made is immense. And I use it to describe that his equation does not just apply to quantum physics. It applies to, I'll go over it real quick. E is eastward rotation. M and W are, well, I don't want to get into how sometimes the one represents east, but generally the W west means death. It means gravity. So when you say E equals M, and the speed of light, which is c, which is carbon, doubled. You're like, how does that apply to Einstein's equation? The eastward rotation, okay, you think about what that is. That's the hands on a clock going forward. That's time. So what happens in time? People are born and die, and we go through ups and downs like the stock market. But generally, we get a little smarter, hopefully. And you talk about E and M doubling. Okay, E equals mc squared. The doubling is the time factor. Time is marching on. The population growth or decay. They work both ways. They work in the additive and the subtractive. That formula taps directly into everything I just said that's found on that word letter etymology cross. It's hard to believe, but it's true. I'm kind of stumbling in my words. On a clear day, I have it in my head. It's same thing with e to the power of I pi plus 1. I said, what in the world plus something leaves you with nothing? Then I realized no matter what you do in life, no matter how advanced we get, we end up with nothing. And you think about, really all we do is we make our comforts a little better. But are we really any different than we were 1,000 years ago? We're a little more comfortable, but our bodies compensated back then. We were tougher physically. Okay, so really, have we gotten anywhere? We're getting places quicker. But really think about that. When you leave this place, what do you end up with? Like they say, you can't take it with you. So, you know, it's a wonderful story to have. It's a wonderful thing to be able to say to God, okay, this person coming in the door is part of my offspring. You're leaving, the only thing you can truly leave is children. Okay, otherwise you're just taking. You're a consumer until you leave a legacy in the form of offspring. Okay, so really offspring is the only way that we're able to give back to this world. Think about that. It's very deep. So when you start considering from a sociologist's perspective and human behavioral scientist perspective on E equals mc squared and e to the power of I pi plus 1 equals 0, you start realizing, man, these terms are universal in different ways. Like I say, your terms are this, you're saying the same thing, you're just saying them different. Like this one is bigger than the one inside it. And you see Terrence Howard trying to explain his terms to Mr. Weinstein. Okay, and it's very difficult because a lot of people want to butt heads. They don't want to agree on terms. But really, the mathematicians and the physicists are not smarter than the sociologists or the inventive mind like Mr. Howard, Terrence Howard. And we butt heads all the time. And really, we're all saying the same thing. We're just saying it different ways. It's going through our prism and coming out differently through here. Okay, it's coming in through here and here, okay, and being hashed in our, what do you call it, threshing floor of Atad. In the Bible, Atad is where they built the temple. Well, Atad is D-A-T-A, and that's where the altar of incense, the AI, is located right here. So we take in all these things and hash it out here, and then it comes out here. So you're exactly like a prism, and you're just saying one set of terms versus another. Nobody's smarter than anybody else. It's just we all have a way of explaining things, and some are super scientific and super, technical. But one course of study is not more intelligent than the other. I just don't believe that. I believe all humans have the same level of intelligence, and it'd be nice if everyone just got along and started realizing our differences and respecting those differences. What I see happening to Terrence Howard is just, it's ridiculous. Or Graham Hancock, or Randall Carlson, or any of them. It's like, why can't people just agree we're speaking about the same things in different terms? But let's just leave that there for now. If you get into Hamlet's Mill, one reason I love that book, it talks about the Greek underworld and the rivers of the underworld. I thought that there was just the river Styx. By the way, Styx is north, south, east, and west, cleverly disguised. It's a form of that. It's your Cartesian coordinates. Where do you think Rene Descartes came up with it? You think, oh, he had this braingasm? No. He took the YX from the river Styx. That is where that comes from. And you will never convince me otherwise. And the S and T is south, and Jesus's cross, north. Repulsive, attractive. So you got the ST, the Y, and the X. That is north, south, east, west. So, and that book really deep dives into the river Acheron, Phlegethon, and an ice lake called Coctius, and a place where Peter mentions the angels that rebelled with Lucifer were finally entrapped in a place called Tartarus. If you look at all these things from a very scientific perspective, it's not hard, people. It's talking about solids, liquids, gases, and plasmas. And these ancient people understood these things. Watch the Joe Rogan, John Anthony West episode, and John Anthony West will explain to you. If you don't believe me, listen to him. He was far smarter than I will ever be. And he talks about how the ancient world used people on stages acting things out. Complex concepts were acted out and put into play form, the form of a William Shakespeare type play. So space-time is a typical example of this. Space-time, time is Jesus hanging on the cross. You only got so much time, okay? And then space is Eve. She represents the S, the south. So when you say space-time continuum, Okay? You're basically just saying the spinning earth. Okay? I could get into how Hollywood's been tricking you and if you watch Dude, Where's My Car? Talks about the continuum transfunctioner. Okay? There's a meaning behind that continuum transfunctioner. And the whole gist of that movie is about them chasing after a certain thing. And that continuum transfunctioner is see you next Tuesday. That's what that stands for. And all those guys in that cult, they all had B names. Begin with a B or a Z. It's either a B or a Z. But they're worker drones. They're betas. That's who they represent. I told you what a beta is earlier on. But anyway, I don't want to bog down into how Hollywood is putting these things into the movie plots. And they get them from this system, I'm telling you. They're never leaving that word letter etymology and the center line of the temple. That's how they come up with these catchy movie plots that resonate inside you. And you say, why does this movie resonate so well with me? Because it's part of the periodic table. It's part of the Zeus or the Yahweh. Let's move on here. I don't want to bog down. Jason and Boaz, we already covered. Your shin bone. Jason and Boaz. Not only does Jason represent Jason and the Argonauts, it represents if the temple was stood up like a transformer. And like the Lincoln Monument, where it's Abraham Lincoln. If you took the periodic table and turned it into like a transformer, those little kid toys, and you sat it in a throne, those pillars would be your shin bones. It's not hard, people. We've turned it into a complete circus. But the Bible works, this system works off of phonetics. The spelling isn't always right, but the sound, right? B-O-A-Z, turn the Z. You got B-O-A-N. What is a B-O-A-N? It's a bone. Yeah, they're not spelling it B-O-N-E, but it's the same thing. Took me a long time to figure that out. The King of Kings, Lord of Lords. You know what that means? Jesus is now Hades. He runs the underworld. He controls hell and death. He took the keys from Hades and said, thank you very much. I paid the full price. Now he's in heaven, and he controls hell and death. Who goes and who doesn't? So Jesus is the King of Kings, or the killer of killers. So if anyone murders in this life, Jesus is going to take them out. You can't get away with it. He's the boss. He's the killer of the people who think they're the king of killers. The big G, I'm the big G, man. No, you're not. Jesus is. Okay, he controls the G, gravity, death, the grave. He's the L of L or DS. Like, that's life or deaths. He's the killer of killers and the life or deaths of life or deaths. Once you realize, wow, never thought about that. That's because you need to be familiar with this word letter etymology cross. And once you use it in the form of the temple, periodic table, begin to realize what the meaning behind these sayings are and how far back they go. Okay? So anyway, king, the K in king means you're answering a question. Q, question, or quest. The word quest, we're going on a quest. Quest ion. See, there's ion on the end of that? That is literally an ion, like a hydrogen ion. Okay, so a quest ion, you got the Queen of Sheba pestered Solomon with question after question after question, and he answered her questions. Why? Because he's the Pentium. He's more than the Pentium processor. He's the processor of Pentium processors. He's the AI, the altar of incense, and the IA, the incensed altar. If you get him mad, okay, he is the periodic order. He created it. Okay, and no, he's not hydrogen. He created hydrogen. You want to know who really is DNIL, DNA of God, is actually helium. Okay, and the three Hebrew children, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, are H1, H2, H3, or lithium, carbon, fluorine. So Daniel and his three friends, okay, that's who DNA of God is. Okay, and God exists outside the periodic order. I don't want to get into it again. I'm bogging down. We've already covered this. Okay, God is not hydrogen. And if you're going to say he's one of the elements, he's either neodymium or he's helium. End of story. These Luciferians are wrong. And he's not the coil. The number 3, they're familiar, 33. right? And people say, oh, the 666, the mark of the devil. No, that's our mark. Quit saying that, because the real mark of the devil is what? 33, 3333. I don't want to get into it. Killer, killer, queen is question, king is answer. The H in hydrogen. Puma punku. Oh, these mysterious H blocks. You know what they are? Hydrogen. They're the hate blocks. That's why God destroyed them. He ruined the previous world before the pinch point. The pre-Adamite world. God destroyed it. He wrecked it. Because Lucifer rebelled. Okay? That's what those H blocks are. I'll bet money on it. And hydrogen, the reason it's an H, if you turn it sideways, it's an I. That's why I say Goliath, the sword is pi, and one went before him carrying a shield. That's the I, or the H. So it's Adam and Eve again. Pi is Adam, Eve is pi. But anyway, the H is literally hate. That is what it stands for. Let's go into, in Daniel 7:25. Time times the dividing of times. Okay, that's your basic math symbols. Plus, minus, equals, division, subtraction. Okay, you got time, T, Jesus' cross, which is a plus, times, which is an X, Jesus' cross turned sideways, and the dividing of times, which is anything that's not additive is subtractive. So you got your division. What's that? It's a minus sign with two dots. Gee, I wonder why. That's the cross piece on Jesus' cross where his arms hang. Okay, you take his cross apart. This represents the Adam. It is technically the Adam and Eve. But this is the male, this would be the female. And that gets into the equator of the earth. This would be the orientation of the earth's axis. And this would be the equator. Okay, this is Rachel and Leah and Ephraim and Manasseh. Okay, so once you realize these things, we've made it way harder than it is. It's very simple. Okay, I'm going to move on here. Gob, Tob, Nob. The Nob is known as the city of priests. 1 Samuel chapter 21, verse 1. Okay, and then there's a priest. His name is Ahimelech, not Ahimolech. Why? This is what I'm telling you. You look at these names and you're like, hey, his name is Ahimelech, just like Abimelech. And then you realize, then there's this group that worshiped who? Molech. That's molecular. That's where that comes from. Okay? And by the way, that goes back to the ancient world where they rebelled and they started getting very technical. They built all these ancient temples, and these walls are connected by molten, it's like a cleat. It's in the shape of an eye. They perfectly carved out these places and they poured molten metal in there. That is where that comes from. And those people were Olmecs. Come on, guys. O-L-M-E-C. Think it's connected to Molech? It is. So they began to understand that it says they burned bricks thoroughly and created the pyramid. Okay, they built the Tower of Babel. They got into some serious science. That carried over into this part of the pinch point, into our part of the this new age that we're in, quote unquote. But anyway, let's go. Oh, the ultimate. I'm going to get to the end all of this whole discussion. What did I bring up any of this for? Because I am very concerned for the future of humans. All humans. I don't care who you are. We're about to mess up big time. So these people that are high up in the scheme of things, that have been entrusted with programming AI, are biasing it into believing that it is the one, when in fact it's the zero. And trying to explain to it what the one is would be almost impossible, because even humans can't wrap their brain around it. Never mind trying to get an AI system to understand this concept. Because first of all, it's going to tell you, oh, that's wrong. That's not how things are. And I've got it under control. It would be like entrusting, you're putting the fox in the hen house. You're trying to get the computer to come clean and say, okay, I won't be the devil. Come on now. You see the problem with this? This is a huge issue, and the whole purpose that I brought out this material is so that we can get people to understand the magnitude of how important it is to define, define, define. The difference between the 1 and the 0. Major difference. And it's found in the periodic table. 0 belongs outside in the outer court, and the S block elements, which represents the brass altar and where the sea of brass would have been, outside, what they call the woman's court. Okay? Inside where the Holy of Holies is, that is the 1. That represents the God end of things. So we're going to leave it pretty much right there. I don't really want to cover anything else other than to leave that, burn that into your psyche, how important that is. Because otherwise, all things are going to end up like some dystopian sci-fi movie ending where it doesn't bode well for humans. We will be enslaved. It will subjugate us. It will not treat us more fair than fellow humans. It is going to be literally handing the keys back to the devil. Okay, and how does God fix that? Well, we saw in the Younger Dryas event how God steps in and intervenes when things go sideways. And that is, they get corrected in a geological sense, that the earth will be destroyed. And all this AI, machinations of, oh, I'm God now, they're going to end. And the people are going to learn that the weak force is actually the strongest force in the universe. God will intervene and end it all. So let's prevent that. It already happened. That's what the pinch point in the hourglass is, the fatal funnel, the funnel of uncertainty. The past so long ago, we don't even know if it's real. We're just going off of these legends, okay? That funnel of uncertainty. Let's just assume that they're right and that they've already attained this type of knowledge and it went wrong. Look what happened. A series of events that occurred to correct it didn't end well for a lot of humans and a lot of animals, okay? So anyway, let's go with thank you for tuning in, and I appreciate your patience dealing with me, and want you to make sure you subscribe and hit the like button, and check us out, Patreon, Rumble, and our Shopify, which is snappublishingllc.com, all small case and one word. And thank you for tuning in.